Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this October 14th, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. My guest today is Bert Krantz of the Alamo Ministry, and Bert's been on my show regularly. And this may be about the fourth time in the last couple months, and we've been going over a number of different points about the Alamo case, how Tony Alamo was framed and sits in jail for 175 years, how 35 or more children of the ministry have been really kidnapped by the state, and Bert's children being some of those kids. And then we got into, just briefly, the takeover of their property, which I want to get into in a moment. But I want to relate this to the Pope's visit. And the reason I want to do that is prior to his visit, Bert came on my show and we had a discussion about it. And Bert, I was wondering, I'm sure you followed a number of things that he talked about. But one of his main concerns was distribution of wealth. He says that he wants to see it more evenly distributed around the world. I find that hypocritical in a sense, since he's probably the leader of the richest organization in the world, and he never talked about, giving up some of their property. However, your ministry now has been attacked by the Vatican-led New World Order, and they're in the process of stealing your property. And I say steal, and I don't mean that I mean what I say. How does that relate to what the Pope said about this distribution? What do you think that really means, what he said? Bert, are you there? Are you there?
Well, Greg, yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
You don't hear me?
Yeah. Go on.
Okay. That's a great question. Of course, that's not. You still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a new. It's not a new idea with the Vatican to this redistribution of wealth. They've been talking that for a long, long time. They just haven't come out so much in public with it. They've come out with it in encyclicals and their writings, their canon laws, and they've wanted to redistribute the wealth of everybody else but them for a long time and redistribute it into their pockets. And, it's to break America. They want to break the United States down into like a feudal country. And, they have stolen our properties. They did it before in the 1990s, and they did it again recently. They decreed that anybody that belongs to Tony Alamo's church doesn't deserve to have property. They don't have the right to own property. They said we as a group don't have a right to own property. They decreed that it was all Tony Alamo's, and they just took it just like that.
And where does that stand now? Is it still in the courts, or has the property actually been taken?
Well, what if there's any remnant of property that we still own? They're still scrounging around to dig it up and get it. They've gotten most of it. I can't think of anything they didn't get.
Wow. And how did it, this case, they did it through civil lawsuits, right? Go through some of the cases that you know about. Go ahead.
Well, the case that I am particularly familiar with is when the judge made the decrees that we, because the whole, about 100 members of the congregation went to a court trial in Arkansas before Judge Barry Bryant to decide whether Tony Alamo owned everything, or because that's the way their lawsuits, that's the theory they use, that Tony Alamo owned everything and everybody else was just like nobodies, just non-existent. And so we personally went in there before the judge and argued our side of the case that no, we are people, we do have lives, and this is our property. We've had it in good faith, and it's been manifest that it's our property for all the years that we've been a church, which is almost 50 years now. And it's manifest that every member of the church is a full share owner of all the property, because anytime anyone is in need, has a real need, like medical needs or any kind of a need, then whatever amount of the resources of the church are needed to take care of that need are expended. And that's always been the way that it is. I mean, it's just a total cooperative effort. And we've had this in good faith, and it has worked for all these 50 years. So, we pled these kind of arguments before the judge, and the Supreme Court has even agreed we're a bona fide church, and we do have the right, according to the state of Arkansas, to own property, even not being incorporated, just as an unincorporated group. So the judge just brushed that aside. In fact, if you remember that video that I showed you, one of the points, the point that we were making with that little video that just kind of told the story of how the church works, is that we are a cooperative, interdependent, just a Bible-believing Christian church that's just trying to bring the gospel to the four corners of the earth. And we have, while we do have associates all throughout the world, we, the members of the church or associates of the church in the United States, live in the various properties that the church owns cooperatively or corporately. And the judge, when he saw that video, all he saw in that, he didn't see the cooperative effort. He didn't see the fact that we had a unified vision, a unified purpose. All he saw was that we were all wearing this, a lot of people were wearing the same T-shirt, and so that showed that Tony Alamo controlled the church. That's the way he saw it. That's what he said. And, and when he said that, and then he says, he looks at the Supreme Court decision, and he doesn't understand why we would bring that in as evidence when the Supreme Court plainly said that we are a bona fide church and that we did have the right to receive the benefits. The reason the Supreme Court ruled on our case is because it was the Department of Labor bringing a suit against the church that people were supposed to get wages. Well, the Supreme Court found that, people should receive minimum wage, but they found that the benefits and the income that people received from the church in other ways, in housing and transportation and insurance and medical and dental and all the different benefits that they had, were far surpassed minimum wage. But what they wanted to do was have Tony and Susan was still alive when the case first started, to write out checks to everybody, and they wanted to rip the church off for, their quarterlies. There's thousands of dollars per quarter to just back then try and break the church, and the church didn't break through that. And now they're trying this effort of stealing every piece of property that we own, but the church is not property.
Yeah, and what sounds so hypocritical here is that if we look at the Catholic holdings in this country, which are vast, churches, land, schools, etc., and all of the charges that have been justified against these pedophile priests, it's interesting that they have not went after the Vatican holdings at all. And it seems to me that they're in this, look, if you just, what about all these priests that work at all of these wineries in the Napa Valley and other places? And what about the other ones that do work in all these monasteries and all these dioceses? They're not given a check for minimum wage. Why do they come after you when they don't go after them, especially when the abuse charges far surpass what happened in your church? There hasn't been any charges proven really against anybody in your ministry, although on record they have Tony in jail. But when you look at that case, it's as flimsy as they come. I think it stems from basically your years of criticizing and telling the people to look at what the Vatican is really all about. And tell us how you learned about what the Vatican was all about back when you first became a member.
Okay, well, first off, all those were very good points that you brought out, that none of the Vatican or their holdings are ever gone after. None of their pedophile priests or very few of them are prosecuted. Most of them are just juggled around. And to answer your question, the first time I ever realized that the Catholic Church was just bogus as a $32.50 bill was when the Lord revealed himself to me. Because as I mentioned to you before on your program, I was brought up a Catholic. I was an altar boy. I went to parochial schools. I learned many different things about the Catholic Church, and I thought that was what God was. I thought it was the one true church. I was just brought up that way. But it didn't really mean much to me, because God didn't mean much to me, because the Catholic Church never taught me that God should mean much to me. And as a result, it was a very frivolous idea I had of God. Like it was just like a nobody. And so I didn't care about God. I didn't think about God. I never went to church. I never, as I got older. And by the time I was 19, I was virtually suicidal. And it was at that very, very low point in my life. I was in college on drugs, partying, barely. I mean, I wasn't even able to keep a CA average, cheating as much as I could. I was just so much into partying and the different demonic activities that go on in college campuses. So at that point in my life, God revealed himself to me. And when God opened my mind up to who he is, to what he is, to Jesus being alive and God being all powerful and knowing all things and having created me and all these different thing to do with the Catholic Church. It had nothing to do with any religious upbringing or education I ever had. So that was my first clue, you see. And when I entered into the Tony Alamo Christian Ministries back in 1972, it was called the Tony and Susan Alamo Christian Church back then. I already knew these things, and so I would hear in messages here and there, things about the Vatican, things about the Catholic Church. But as far as the depths of the wickedness of the Antichrist, I never really caught on to that until Tony on the attack with the Vatican. And even then, it was so shocking. It was like just a shock to my mind. And it took a little while for me to absorb it. I think you had the same experience. You couldn't even believe that people can be this bad. But the Bible plainly says that they are. There's a devil, and he has agents on this earth. And somebody is causing all these wars. Somebody is causing all this insanity that's going on in the world today. And it's just filtering down, and you see all these different, demonic activities that are just being rubbed in the faces of everybody, and everybody is becoming numb to it, to where, sin's just not that bad, to where not only the United States, but the whole world now is like a Sodom and Gomorrah. It's very much like that. And we all know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. God vaporized that place where there's sin.
Yeah, but kind of reflect on this. We talked earlier about the Pope coming. Now that he's been here, spoke to the United Nations, talked to our leaders, I was watching much of it, and they said that no foreign dignitary was ever given such a welcome as these leaders of our country and the world did at the United Nations. Unprecedented. What's your thoughts about that, and where do we stand in the days to come?
Well, I think Shakespeare answered that one. All the world is a stage, and all the people in it are actors. And those are some of the top actors in the world. You think that the people in Hollywood are good actors. These people on the world stage are just acting out their parts, like Obama and the different presidents and and world dignitaries that you're mentioning, and the Pope Francis is playing his part, and that's his part to bring in a cohesive plan for the one world church, the one world government, for it to all gel. It has to have a strong spiritualist type head. And he's playing a very good role. He's coming off as if he's holy and spiritual, and yet he's preaching doctrines of like wealth distribution, political correctness, environmental issues, things that the same thing that the governments of the world want. So he's promoting this one world conglomerate, what the Bible calls beast. That's what the Bible calls it, the beast. And the beast is, the Bible even says, they'll say, who can make war with the beast? Because you look at this conglomerate and you think, well, who could possibly fight against this? What could you do? You've even mentioned that, it's almost like you could do nothing. And really, in the flesh or physically, there's nothing you could do against it. But in God, we can bring people out of it in the sense that, they can be set free from the bondage of all this in Jesus Christ. And that's the mission of our church. And that's why they hate us so bad, because we do bring people out of that system, and they cannot be controlled. And Satan is the one that really hates that, because his goal is to bring everyone to hell, for everyone to spend eternity in hell. And him giving the power to the Vatican, giving the power to the one world government, he's infesting or controlling, or what would you say, what's the word, possessing all these different actors on the stage, and they're just doing his bidding and dancing his dance. They are, and that's really the story behind it.
Rarely a day.
Are you there?
Yes. Rarely a day goes by when, if you look closely at the news overseas, the Vatican is constantly fighting off a scandal somewhere, whether it be regards to finances, whether it be in regards to genocidal activities that are being brought up now in many parts of the world. They're always fighting these battles, and it seems to just, the people just seem to forget about it, and they seem to go on and get even stronger. But one criticism that I don't believe they really ever want to get out into the churches is how the reformers spoke about the book of Revelations and pinpointing the Vatican as the Antichrist throughout the centuries and to this day. I know your church interprets the Bible in that way, and I just wanted to reflect on that. I believe that's one reason they wanted to silence you. They didn't want that to spread because they wanted to clear their name in so-called the ecumenical movement. What's your thoughts on that? You there?
Well, that's absolutely the truth. Yes, I'm sorry, maybe I turned away from the mic. It's absolutely true what you're saying, that, they have, or our church for years and years has pinpointed the Vatican as the Antichrist that sits on the city of 7 hills, that's decked in purple and scarlet, fine twined linen, gold, and decked with jewels, and all the kings of the way the Bible says it, with her. They calls her the great whore. And everyone in the world commits fornication, and people take on this spirit, because most of the people in the world, and I'm saying most of the people in the world, that's what Jesus said, that the broad is the way and wide is the gate that leads to eternal destruction, and straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leads to eternal life, and very few will enter in thereat. So when I say most of the people in the world want to have it this way, they don't want to have the kind of restrictions or the kind of control or the kind of rules, laws, guidance that God, they don't want to have a God
Are you there? I'm losing you a little bit. Hello?
Still here. Can you
Okay,
hear me now?
yeah, I'm working on don't worry, the show will come off as best as I can. I'm kind of got a quick fix on my internet recently, so everything's there. I've just missed a couple of your words, but go on with the idea. Tell us a little, for people that don't read the Bible, how does the book of Revelations and other parts of the Bible really how does it pinpoint the Vatican?
Well, I mentioned what it says, how it describes the Vatican. You can go to any travel agency in the world and say, I want a ticket to the city of Seven Hills, and you'll get a ticket to Rome, Italy. And then you can look in history and in current events in the way that everyone is bowing down and doing the will of this demonic despot, the vicar of Satan on this earth, the Antichrist himself, the Pope. And you see, and then you look at the history, you'd have to look through the history of the Jesuits, which of course is not that easy to do. Of course, with the internet you can, but you have to do a little bit of diligence to get the true history of the Jesuits. And so the book of Revelation describes vividly not only the purple and the scarlet and the description of the way that the physical description of the Catholic Church and their system. It also mentions their control, and as I was mentioning earlier in the program, of how they work with the government, and Satan has to have a church and a government, and it all comes together in what the Bible calls the beast. And they have false prophets. They have a mouth that speaks great swelling words. That's the media. And you mentioned about all the different criticisms and the different scandals that the Vatican goes through, but somehow they make it through there unscathed, and the Pope comes out smelling like a rose somehow, even though the Pope just before this one, the one that just retired, the second vicar of Christ that we have on earth, he was the head of the organization or the division of the Vatican that made sure that all the different pedophile activities and demonic child molestation was kept quiet. That was his job, and he put out that document that was released in the 60s, in the 1960s, that scheduled out the plan to make sure that none of these child abuse and scandalous rapes and all the different scandals of the Vatican, that make sure that none of them really surfaced. And of course they weren't that successful, because some people with some guts came out and they really made sure that these different scandals came to the surface. There's a few people that have done that, and it's become well known, and yet people still think of it as a small thing, and they don't really relate it somehow. I don't understand how it is. When you ask the question, why don't they go after the different properties of the Vatican? Why don't they take away Catholic? I don't understand that, because...
Bert, you know what? Let's think about that one, and I got to take a break. We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. if some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. We're talking with Bert Krantz of the Alamo Ministry, and for years I've been covering this story for a reason. They have been targeted by what I call the Vatican-led New World Order, which encompasses the FBI, alcohol and tobacco, all the agencies of government working together, the court systems, to silence Christian ministries that talk the truth about the Vatican. It gets down to that. And ministries like this are few and far between, and it's been the Vatican's intention to shut this ministry down once and for all. And my story regarding that show that freedom of religion no longer exists in this country if this ministry, which was doing nothing but good works, preaching the Bible, if they can't do that, then none of us can do really anything, because there is a limit now in this country. We cannot speak against the Pope, and that's why he was here, to show his power publicly to everyone in America. That's why 1 million people attended that Mass in Philadelphia, Bert. Incredible. And it goes on. And some of the statements, and I want you to comment about these, and then we'll move forward with some other things. But I found a couple of his statements interesting. He actually did say that even atheists can find eternal life. Then he goes on to say that it's dangerous to talk with Jesus Christ unless you intercede and have us do it for you, is basically what he was saying. So he said it's dangerous to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Can you believe that statement coming out of the mouth of this man?
Well, sure. It's the devil speaking right out of his mouth, and it's prophecy, like we were talking about during the break, that they call good evil and evil good. The things of the Lord, having a personal relationship with God, which is the whole reason Jesus came to earth, so we could do that, because we had lost relationship or fellowship or communion with God through sin. And Christ, of course, he did away with sin, nailed it to the cross, took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. To all who will accept him, he gives power to become sons and daughters of the living God. Well, if you're a son or a daughter of the living God, don't you think you would have a relationship with him? Wouldn't you communicate with him? Wouldn't you want to commune with him? This is ridiculous, and people are just buying it up. They're eating it up like honey. Like I was mentioning before the break, there's certain things I can't understand how so many people. I do understand it in the sense that the spirit of the devil, the spirit of Satan, has really overcome the world greatly.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, the media plays a big role in this in our country, because it was nonstop, 24 hours a day coverage of this great papal man coming here. Everyone should look up to he's the embodiment of goodness. I mean, this went on and on every day for that visit. And the point I'm trying to make is, I went through, just recently, the media, just the Google files, on Tony Alamo Ministry, the children of Tony Alamo Ministry, the parents, the lawsuits, all of this stuff. And it was incredible how it is depicted, how you guys are depicted. And if anybody just looked at that, it is basically what the Vatican really is, not you guys. And that's what they do. They counterfeit and charge people like you with the crimes that they're committing. And it's sad. So what I decided to do was, I'm in the process of putting together a press release, which is going to be a little bit of audio, video, and then a written press release that's going to be sent out by hand, return receipt requested, to about 200 outlets, big outlets, radio stations, TV stations, news media. And I want to see the reaction I get. And I'm crafting it in a way that shows the hypocrisy. And I want to see what happens with this, because I believe the media is playing right into the hand of the beast, just like the government. And what I'm doing with this is both through the internet and through press releases using... Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Don't worry about it. With this situation, I want to make sure you're there. What I'm trying to do is to really get a picture and really get people to see if they want to respond and what their responses will be. And through that, I should be able to get at least a handful of interviews, shows to be put on the air, so that this story does not lay to rest. And I'm not going to let it lay to rest as long as I can speak, because to me it's a vital story, and I want people to understand how you guys have been persecuted strictly for telling the truth about history, telling the truth about this organization, and how our country, supposedly the bastion of freedom and liberty and all that kind of good stuff, is nothing more than a Vatican fascist state. Your comments?
It's been that way for a long time, Greg, as you know. And I truly hope and pray that you do get those interviews to get that voice out. A voice in the wilderness is what you sound like to me, because there's not many voices speaking the truth in these last days. And you talked about the coverage that this man got when he came over, and him displaying the power of the Vatican. And truly, it was an awesome display of power. That, people just falling down before this guy, and millions of people, as you said, going to this mass, and the media just eating it up and calling this good, and then just nothing about the scandals of the Vatican. And, our church, we're not a lot of people, but you won't find any cases where we go around killing people that don't believe what we preach. We don't do any harm to anybody that doesn't believe the way we believe. Whereas the Vatican is famous throughout history for murdering and slaughtering and killing those that won't go along with their doctrines.
And
they're well known for that.
Right, and the Pope on this visit took it upon himself to canonize. I don't know what I'm just going to talk how they talk. They canonized another saint, and the guy's name is Junipero Serra. Now, when you look at this guy's history, and I can't remember what order he was with, but he was a Catholic priest. And when you look back at his history, he was an inquisitor responsible for the deaths of many, many native people from, I believe, South America, Central America, etc. And don't hold me to that because I'm just pulling it off the top of my head because I was going to look more into this man. But they took it upon themselves to canonize an inquisitor, a killer. And everybody was going, oh my God, another beautiful saint. Unbelievable to me what goes on. And he also made reference during his speech at the House, and let's talk bluntly, that Capitol building is nothing more than a reflection of St. Peter's Square. When you look at the Vatican and the Capitola, which is, it is almost a replica. And if you look at the pagan statue that they put on the top of that, go and look at that. I mean, he was in his home, in the Capitola, surrounded at the podium. You will see two fasci on the left and right side of the Speaker of the House. The fasci are symbols of Rome, fascist state. He then referred to Pope Innocent, I think it was the third, and there was a picture. They had a emblem in bronze somewhere in the house with Pope Innocent III with a fasci wreath around his head. And he went on with two other people, similar inquisitors, that they were worshiping in the name of freedom. It's incredible and people do not see this, Bert. It's maddening to be from my point of view.
It's so glaringly obvious, really.
Go ahead.
Well, I can do nothing but agree with everything you're saying. They all do all this great show and this and showing this great power and as all the people going along with it. It's just it's just so glaringly anti-Christ. Can you just imagine Jesus Christ doing what these people are doing? Try to imagine that. Jesus Christ, he came preaching repentance. He came preaching salvation. He came healing the sick. He came cleansing the lepers, feeding people, raising the dead. These people are going around bombing people off the face of the earth, fomenting wars all over the world to bring it in. I'm blaming this on the Vatican because it's obvious. You can see that all these world leaders are giving homage to this man, and they're standing under this man, and even ones that are supposedly enemies of each other are all under this man, and he's going around visiting all their countries, and he's telling them what to do. And they're, okay, go attack this one. He's not coming into the one world government. They want to start their own money system or this or that. They're not coming under the umbrella. We've got to bomb them off the face of the earth and make them look real wicked. They've been doing that for years and years and years and years, and now they're still doing it. And this man is to be praised like a god. My Lord, how stupid can people be?
Well, I did a show, I don't know, it was a week ago or so, and I'd mentioned that this was an unprecedented visit because the Pope was speaking before the United Nations and opening up this new year, the United Nations. Okay, and somebody emailed me back and said, oh, Greg, it's not unprecedented. Popes have spoke at the United Nations before. And I said, yes, it is unprecedented because people forget. This was the first Pope that spoke to all the world leaders who were ordered to come. It wasn't just the ambassadors. That's who the Pope spoke to in the past, and that's who most people speak to, the ambassadors to the United Nations. But this time, all the world leaders were there. I'm talking about the world leaders from Russia, China, Middle East, America, Canada, you name it, London. All the foreign countries were mandated to be there, the leaders. He spoke to his, and you know what his plane was called? Shepherd 1. That's what his name was, all over the place. That was his CIA code, Shepherd 1, leading the flock, right?
Leading the flock, that's right.
And so it was unprecedented, this United Nations speech, because it is very rare that all the world leaders assemble. And they did to honor their boss. That's my take on it. And going back to Tony, who was, I a couple of my shows last week and the week before, and I'm going to play a couple next week too, because I hadn't heard his voice in a long time. And I wanted to play some of the old interviews I did back in 2006 and 2008. And he could be speaking right today about the things. Nothing changed. It was like he was back talking about what's happening today, even though it was 10 years ago. And it was incredible, some of the things he was saying, and it reminded me why they put him away. And it was so
because he makes it so clear.
Yeah, and I remember when he was on, he came on and stayed, he said, this was a couple months, 3 months before the raid. He knew what was happening. He understood. Even John Peeler was telling him, an FBI agent, they're planning something big. And I remember the show I had both those guys on, and Peeler was the guy that was assigned by the FBI to bring him down. But then again, he resigned, and we know that story. He actually apologized to Tony on the air, and Tony accepted his apology, even though Peeler was ordered to kill him.
That's Tony. That's the way that the Lord would do. If someone repents, he accepts that. He loves for people to repent of their sin. It's a very wicked thing to want to murder somebody, and yet, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Who are we to be the judge of someone that repents? Now, the Pope says, who am I to be the judge of a homosexual? Well, yeah, if a homosexual repents and comes to the Lord, that could be true. But he's not talking about repentance. You didn't hear one word from the Pope about repentance, about salvation. You don't hear anything biblical or any sound doctrine coming out of that wicked organization, because they're not a church. They're a powerful, very powerful organization who's bent on controlling the world. And the governments of the earth, you just mentioned to me, in order to come to this meeting to listen to the Pope, they're ordered around by the Pope at every level. And,
no better way to, people ask me, well, what are the Jesuits busy doing these days? And I said, well, look at what's going on in the Middle East. Look at what's going on with Russia now joining hands over there to supposedly wipe out ISIS. And this is an incredible story, because it's this mounting, what I call, most people think, how is this chaos going to be determined? Well, I think it's going to be a combination of both a major war involving us, this time we lose, and also this silent war that's going on now with all of these things happening of our rights being taken away. People actually wanting the New World Order to take over. They really want it. And that's the interesting thing about it. People are going to willingly give this land to him, thinking that they can protect us. Unity is best. So I think it's going to be a combination of both. What do you think?
Well, they've been working that propaganda for a long time, and people, they with the, 911, and even before that, you get the Oklahoma City bombings, the first World Trade Center bombings, and then you get all these shootings. We need gun control, all these different events, false flag events, and then getting the people to believe, brainwashed or brain dirtied into thinking that the government just needs to control everything. And this government was not formed that way. It was supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And now it's the people are of, by, and for the government. That's the way it seems. And That's the way the Vatican wants it. You see the fasci in the Senate, that's a fascist symbol. Fascist. That's a dictator, fascist dictator. And that's what the Pope is. He's a dictator. And, you can call it whatever kind of thing you want. They get so many different groups, it's hard to keep track of all these things. You've done a lot of research into this, and you know a lot of the details of these many different organizations, how they all just... They're working in different areas of the politics and government and different social organizations, religious organizations, and somehow they're all working together to bring power to the beast. How is that? It's the power of Satan is working through all of them.
Yeah, one of the Vatican. Even when you start looking at NASA, how that is being orchestrated as well, the false things they put out. I mean, look at the NASA insignia is a serpent's tongue surrounded by a round earth going through what appears to be a flat earth, the serpent's tongue. So this whole idea of NASA is another thing that when you start looking into it, you start seeing how vast they're when you start realizing, I watched somebody who put together, because I wondered, how are the Jesuits involved in astronomy? And you can name, they're still the heads of a lot of the great supposed telescopes in the world and places where they study the universe, as they say, is controlled by Jesuits. And it has been that way since the 1500s. Incredible when you start looking at all those names. And that's just in astronomy. Then you get over into politics and all the things you mentioned, and you first start realizing that they have a hold on most anything. They have a hold on your education. And that's what I find interesting, because didn't the court say that since they couldn't find any abuse of on the parents' part, to justify taking the children, they said, you aren't giving them a quality education. You need to be in public school. Tell us a little bit about the education these kids were getting.
Well, it was manifest when they went into public schools. They were, about a grade level ahead of everybody in their school. They were just acing everything, and we brought that up. And that they would just say, "Well, we're not saying they're dumb. We're just saying they weren't educated properly." Well, they must have been educated pretty good, because when they put them into the public schools, they were coming out ahead of the other children. Our schools was very much a bona fide, qualified school. We used the Abeka curriculum. It's used in many Christian academies and schools throughout the United States. It's well accepted, and it was perfectly lawful in the state of Arkansas, or there was nothing illegal or underhanded or about our school. It was, in fact, the judge backed off of that claim as the trial went on, because one of our attorneys wrote a brief regarding the legality of our school, and that there was no statute, no law in the state of Arkansas that had anything that would be against our school and the way we were teaching our children. So they did back off that, but they were into this, well, you're not vaccinating the children, or just one thing after another. And they just had a battery of, that's another one of these government organizations that you mentioned, like the FBI, the CIA, the DHS, Department of Human Services, is just a great big Goliath of bureaucracy that is like a machine that has to have so many children per month, or else they can't survive. If they don't have children, then what are their people going to do? And so they make the laws in such a way to where, just anything that happens can cause it to where they can take your children away. And many people, it's amazed me that more DHS people aren't murdered when you think of the children that they're stealing from the United States citizens, and they're putting them into just horrible situations.
Right.
And the parents are just torn.
We only got about a minute and a half or 2 minutes here. And I want to get into this subject more. We've discussed the DHS in a couple of shows in the past, but I wanted to go in depth. Maybe in a week or so we'll get in touch. Think about this while the days go by. But I want to concentrate a little bit on what's going on in DHS around the country. Some of the claims, I get emails all the time from people on things you wouldn't believe. They're losing their children over this and that. It's incredible. And also go back to the story of the senator from, her first name was Nancy, I can't think of her last name, the senator from Georgia, state senator, who was trumpeting this to show how this cancer of DHS is not just in one state, but all over the country, and how the feds are using their dollars to
Nancy Schaefer from Georgia.
Nancy Schaefer, yeah. Let's get into her. Like I said, we only got 20 seconds, and I want to thank you for coming on. But in a week or so, we'll get into this, and let's do some research and bring a show together so people can really see the horrors of the DHS. Well, thanks, Bert. We're all out of time, and we'll see you again. Okay, that was Bert Krantz. Good night.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.